Us now is Texas Congressman Michael Burgess. He visited the mega shelter set up in Dallas this week. Congressman, thank you for joining us. What's your take on the situation on the ground?
Well, this is thanks, Chris, for having me on. This clearly is an all-hands-on-deck situation. The congressional district that I represent, my home is somewhat north of where all of this activity is. So we are watching our citizens respond, to take things down, go to help, and a lot of people are writing checks to some of the various non-governmental groups that are gathering money for this, and that's obviously one of the things that's needed right now. Red Cross, Salvation Army, Samaritan's Purse, these are worthwhile groups that people need to consider supporting.
No question. We're putting the information on CNN.com/impact, CNN.com/impact. You can go there, figure out how to help. Those organizations are among the options. Congressman, what are you hearing from the people in charge on the ground about their concerns about further catastrophe, whether or not the worst is over? I know Governor Abbott said, look, the worst isn't over yet. The water's going to crest. What are you hearing from others on the ground?
Well, I did spend part of my day early in the week. The FEMA Region 6 headquarters is actually in the congressional district that I represent, and I spent time at their Emergency Operations Center. And I will tell you, Chris, having been through situations like this before, I was impressed at the amount of coordination that was occurring there in that little office in Denton, Texas, with the coordination between the state agencies and the federal agencies, and that was much earlier in the sequence, but they were doing a great job understanding what each other were doing, and so that there was a minimal of duplication and people weren't getting in each other's way. But the critical need was getting to the people that needed the help. But this is going to go on, make no mistake, this is going to go on. This is not a days or weeks phenomenon, and as we saw with when you saw with Sandy, we saw with Katrina, we saw with Ike, this is going to be a years in recovery process. And clearly, as you've reported this morning, unfortunately, some people will never recover, and that is a tragedy.
And look, we'll have to do a little bit of a wait and see, as agonizing as it is, see what happens when the waters recede, see what the actual state of play and the reality is. But at some point, you're going to have to put on the hard hat, get back into Washington, D.C., and make it happen, not just in this first wave of need. The concern becomes the politics that comes into play in that second, that third wave, when the money is needed. That's where we saw the problems with Sandy funding. You didn't vote for one of those big bills. Politics started to be played. You had people like Senator Cruz, misstating the facts, saying 2/3 of the bill was pork. You know it's not true. How do we avoid it this time?
Well, I think, number one, I think the approach, every storm is different. The approach this time is going to be for immediate help. That won't be the entire tally. You can't even know what the where the price tag is going to end up. But there will be immediate help. We are at sort of at the end of the fiscal year, so the accounts for the various agencies are spent down as they should be at the end of the fiscal year. So there'll be some immediate help that will likely come as early next week, and I really don't think that will be necessarily a hard discussion or a hard vote.
That's just the first wave, though. I'm saying, what can you say to your fellow Republicans who didn't vote for it? A lot of them are in the administration now.
You're going to see after that first wave, clearly there will be data collected, and there'll be evidence presented, and as far as the cost of recovery, I think it will be that will be better known in 2.5, 3 months' time, and I rather suspect, I don't know what the time sequence will be, but there will be a secondary wave of federal dollars that are appropriated, and likely as not, there will be a third wave.
Sure.
And, it's tough because with Katrina, came in, did a big bill, and then did another big bill,
sure.
And then years later found that, unfortunately, they couldn't spend all of the dollars that were sent. So that has been a concern of mine as well. I want to be certain that the help gets where it's needed, when it's needed. But yeah, we do have a responsibility to be good stewards of the taxpayer dollar, and that's a concurrent responsibility.
Is that why you didn't vote for the Sandy financing?
I thought Sandy should have been broken into at least two tranches. It wasn't. I didn't win that argument, but you know, as we learned with Katrina, there were funds that were available but then never spent. There was in fact, I think DHS ended up taking back several $1 billion from FEMA that were unable to be spent. With Sandy, it was a different situation, but I think to anyone's read of the facts currently, there is still a significant amount of money that's either unobligated or unspent.
It's always that
and
way.
As you know,
it's always that way. Every one of these disasters that we've been through, it takes time to spend the money and the needs change.
Yeah, but Chris, it has been 5 years, and as you know, there are people who, I think, probably legitimately feel that they were owed some reimbursement, who've had difficulty getting it. I mean, I am not now, but I mean years after Katrina, trying to help people who felt they had a legitimate claim that was not being paid. These things are difficult. I think my opinion has always been, number one, I'd like to see us budget for disasters rather than come and do supplementals after the fact. In fact, when I was just a regular guy and they had big flooding in the upper Mississippi back in the early part of the Clinton administration, why isn't there a fund there that is appropriated just for that is then used as that first response? They didn't do it then. We don't do it now. I don't quite understand why. But given the fact that we have to do supplementals and everyone is different, but my preference is always, can we put this into more manageable portions? And look, we're tasking our federal agencies right now at the max. So to ask them to do everything that they need to do with all of the bookkeeping and reimbursement, that's a tall order too.
Well,
but I think it's more manageable if the money goes up, perhaps less in that lump sum variety.
Look, I mean, you got to err on the side of giving them more right now because the need is so great. The good news is, because of what happened during Sandy, you've got awareness.
And you will see that.
You've got awareness from the GOP
Sandy,
colleagues. That's all I'm saying. We're just hoping it's better this time. We'll see what happens. I don't want to get ahead of the conversation, but we'll see what happens, and hopefully everybody does the right thing.
Well, I think you will see significant activity on this front, really within a very few days' time.
I hope so. I can't believe you didn't come back early.